Ellie Gould was a 17-year-old English sixth form student from Calne, Wiltshire, who was stabbed to death on the 3rd of May 2019 by Thomas Griffiths, a fellow student at her school, who was also 17 at the time. Griffiths stabbed Gould after she ended the relationship of 3 months. Griffiths was subsequently charged with Gould's murder and pleaded guilty at Bristol Crown Court, where he was sentenced in November 2019 to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 12.5 years in custody before becoming eligible for parole. Because he was under 21 at the time, the law prevented him from receiving a whole life tariff. A campaign launched by Gould's friends to have self-defence lessons taught in school was debated in Parliament, and an education minister agreed to issue guidelines for schools wishing to hold self-defence classes. Gould's mother, Carol, subsequently campaigned to have the law changed to enable young offenders to be treated more like adults when convicted of serious crimes such as murder. Her campaign for Ellie's law led to the presentation of the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill by Robert Buckland, the Secretary of State for Justice, to the House of Commons on the 9th of March 2021. Born on the 6th of February 2002, Ellie Gould was the daughter of Matthew and Carol Gould and lived with her family in Calne, Wiltshire. At the time of her death, she was a Year 12 sixth form student at Harden House School in Chippingham and was studying for her A-levels. A keen horse rider, she participated in local equestrian events as well as competing in cross-country. She had ambitions to join the mounted police and study psychology at university. Gould celebrated her 17th birthday in early 2019. In January of that year, she began dating Thomas Griffiths, a fellow A-level student at school, whom she'd known since they were in Year 7. Griffiths was her first boyfriend. Gould's mother has commented that her husband wasn't overly keen on Griffiths because he didn't say much, but she assumed this aspect of his character was just down to his age. As Gould's exams approached, she wanted to focus on her studies and felt the relationship was not right for her, so ended it in early May. Gould said that she felt suffocated by Griffiths' attention, and on the night before her murder, told friends he had not taken the split well. On the 3rd of May 2019, Griffiths of Derryhill, Wiltshire, was dropped off at school by his mother. After emailing his teachers to tell them he was feeling unwell, he walked to Chippingham bus station where he caught a bus back to Derryhill before returning home. His mother also returned home, and after hiding in the wardrobe of his bedroom so that she would not discover him absent from school and waiting for her to depart again, he took the keys to a silver Ford Focus and drove to Gould's house. Following an argument, Griffiths attempted to strangle her, then used a knife he had taken from the family kitchen to stab her in the neck 13 times. Griffiths spent an hour at the house attempting to clean up the crime scene, using clothes to do this, which he placed in a plastic bag. He also washed his trainers in the kitchen sink and cleaned the knife using an apron before placing it in Gould's hand so as to make her injuries appear to be self-inflicted. He then used Gould's finger to unlock her mobile phone and, posing as her, texted one of her friends who was due to give her a lift to school, telling the friend not to collect her. After returning home to change, Griffiths put his clothes in the washing machine, then dumped the bag of bloodied items in a local woodland. A neighbour saw him returning from the woods and drove him back to school, where he was subsequently collected by his mother. Later that day, he sent text messages to friends indicating that he and Gould were going away on a break together, and to Gould's phone asking her if they could meet. Gould's body was discovered by her father at 3 p.m. that afternoon in her kitchen. Wiltshire police arrested Griffiths on suspicion of murder at 6 p.m. on the 3rd of May, outside a friend's house. He was taken to Melksham police station to be held for questioning. Evidence was gathered from Griffiths' mobile phone and CCTV cameras tracking his movements, and a neighbour who saw someone matching his description outside of Gould's house. Griffiths also had marks on his neck that were consistent with defence wounds. He initially denied involvement in Gould's death, claiming not to have seen her that day, and also that he had arranged to go to her house so that the pair could study together. Police then matched blood on his trainers with that belonging to Gould, and he was charged with a murder. Griffiths was charged with murder on the 6th of May and appeared before Salisbury Magistrates Court the following day. He appeared at Bristol Crown Court on the 9th of May, where a provisional trial date was set for the 28th of October. He did not enter a plea and was remanded in custody. At a plea hearing on the 29th of August 2019, Griffiths pleaded guilty to Gould's murder and was remanded in custody to await sentence. Recorder Peter Blair QC also lifted reporting restrictions that prevented Griffiths being named by media outlets describing his crime as extremely grave. Griffiths' sentencing hearing took place on 8th of November, where Richard Smith QC spoke for the prosecution and Sasha Wass QC represented the defence. The court was told that Griffiths had argued with Gould prior to her death and that the post-mortem showed pressure applied to her neck had incapacitated her. There was evidence to suggest that after the murder, he had placed the knife in Gould's left hand in an attempt to make it appear as though she had inflicted injuries on herself. It was also said that Griffiths claimed to not remember the events of what happened and tried to explain the marks on his neck as being from self-harm, but they were more likely to be a result of his young victim fighting for her life. A letter written by Griffiths to the court was read out in which he expressed heartfelt remorse for his actions. "I'm so sorry. I know my apologies and explanations will never be enough, but I hope in time I can show how truly sorry I am." He also claimed his mental health was not good at the time of the murder. Sentencing Griffiths, Judge Mr. Justice Garnham described his actions as a frenzied knife attack and the most appalling act on a vulnerable young woman in her own home where she should have been safe. "The effects of your actions have not only snuffed out the life of this young, talented girl, but loaded pain on her friends and family." But it was ruled that the murder was not premeditated because Griffiths did not take the weapon with him. Griffiths was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 12.5 years before he is eligible for parole. Because of his age, the law prevented him from receiving a whole life tariff. Gould's funeral was held on the 29th of May. The service was attended by family and friends. Following Griffiths' sentence, the case was subsequently referred under the unduly lenient sentences scheme, but on 6 December 2019 it was announced that it could not be referred to the Court of Appeal because the law prevents people under the age of 21 from being given a whole life tariff. Speaking about the decision, Carol Gould described the legal process as a crazy system where those under the age of 18 have the same starting point as younger children. There's a huge difference between a 10-year-old and an 18-year-old, and really the laws need to be changed. Gould's friends began a campaign to have compulsory self-defence lessons taught in schools, feeling that basic knowledge of self-defence would have saved their life, and that it should be taught alongside subjects like swimming and road safety. The campaign was backed by James Gray, the MP for Norfolkshire, and on the 12th of March 2020, the matter was debated in the House of Commons. Vicky Ford, a junior minister with the Department of Education, ruled out making self-defence lessons compulsory for schools, but agreed to issue guidelines and ask head teachers if they felt self-defence classes were right for their schools. She said the balance of risk was much clearer with things such as swimming and road safety, but that teaching self-defence relied very much on the age and maturity of pupils and their understanding that it could only be used in emergencies. Carol Gould subsequently campaigned for the introduction of Ellie's Law that would enable young offenders to be treated more like adults when convicted of a serious crime, such as murder. In August 2020, the Daily Telegraph reported that Robert Buckland, the Secretary of State for Justice, was reviewing the sentencing process and considering a graded approach depending on the age of the offender. At the time, the case of Hashim Abedi, the brother of the Manchester Arena bomber, had also recently resulted in him not qualifying for a whole life tariff because he was 20 at the time of the bombing. On the 16th of September, Buckland presented the sentencing white paper to the House of Commons, which includes provisions to amend the law with regard to young offenders who commit serious crimes. The paper was not criticised by Gould's family because the new law would not apply in the case of a defendant who did not take a weapon to the scenes of a murder, such as Griffiths. Gould's parents subsequently wrote to Gray to request their daughter's name be removed from the proposals if they were not amended. On the 9th of March 2021, Buckland introduced the police crime sentencing and court bill that allowed the law to treat future teenage killers like adults. thus increasing the minimum sentence that they can be given to as much as 27 years. Although the legislation does not apply retrospectively, it removes the right of killers such as Griffiths to have their sentences reviewed. Carol Gould described the changes as a huge cloud that's been lifted from above their heads. The Ellie Gould case was subject to 2 television documentaries that aired in the UK in October and November 2020. The 31st October episode of Britain's Deadliest Kids was broadcast by Quest Red, while on the 2nd of November, the crime and investigation documentary Murder at My Door covered the case. The film featured many of Gould's school friends who had cooperated with the makers. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe if you liked the video. Any story suggestions, please comment them below.